Professor Hurwitz. This video is to help explain the process of why you use Github. Github is a method of saving files and having those files be accessible to a group, and having a way where files kind of update themselves and those updates become instantaneous for other people. So Github is a really good way to share files with a group, like so a project like say a website or a game or something where you have multiple files that multiple people are working with and updating. Github is a really great way to do this. So I'm just going to begin by explaining kind of sort of how dealing with multiple files can go, and then how that might relate to GitHub. So let's talk about just if you had a computer, say your home computer, and then you had, say, your work computer. So you have your home computer, you work in Microsoft Word, and on your home computer you create this file, right? So it exists on this computer, but let's say I want to take this file and transfer it to my work computer so I can continue to work on it. So what I might do is I have this thumb drive. I basically copy the original to the thumb drive, take it over to the work computer, basically kind of copy it again, and I end up with technically 3 versions of the file. There's the original that's on my home computer, there's the one that actually sits on the drive, and then there's the one that sits on the computer, my work computer. Now, let's just kind of say that I update, the file here on my home computer, or sorry, on my work computer. So I make changes to it, I make adjustments, okay? You can see that the work computer version of the Microsoft Word file has been updated, but the one at my home is not, because it's not connected to this version, nor is the one that's actually on my drive. So typically the way that you would handle something like this is I would basically have to copy this to, delete the old version from the drive, copy it, and then bring that back home, delete the original version of my home computer, copy this version to my home computer, so that we have the same version at home and at work. So you can see how this can lead to problems because we technically have multiple versions of the file kind of going around. I had to be very meticulous to make sure that both my home and my work had the same updates, basically. Okay, and that's kind of how things went for a long time. If you were dealing with multiple files, you had to make sure you're working with the latest version of the file and that sort of stuff, and then maybe you had to wait for the file to be transferred back to another computer. So let's compare that method with, say, a method called, sort of a different way of working with files. So a couple years ago there was this service called Dropbox.com. Some of you may or may not work with it, and it's something called cloud storage. Okay, so the idea is basically, if I save a file, I can upload it, or upload a copy to Dropbox.com, which is its own storage area. It's separate than my home computer. But another thing that Dropbox created is something called a sync folder. Okay, and the idea is it's this little folder that sits on your computer. And if you save a file to the sync folder, so it's going to go here, anything saved to the sync folder automatically gets sent and updated to Dropbox.com. So if I saved a file to this folder here, the result is it's going to make a copy that goes to Dropbox.com automatically. I don't have to I don't have to upload it. The action is automatic. Also, if I was to update this on my computer, make a change to it, that change automatically updates on Dropbox.com. So you can see it's nice because it saves us the step. Anything we do automatically gets updated not only on our own computer, but on Dropbox.com. If I go to my work computer, which is a separate computer, I can log on to Dropbox.com and then download this file. Okay, so whatever's the current version of the file here, I can download that. So now, I have a copy of the file at work. So I can switch to any computer and always have, in theory, the latest version of the file on Dropbox.com. I don't have to worry that, oh, this is an older version, or, I left there's a newer version on my home computer, because as long as you saved it to the sync folder, it should update to Dropbox.com, and then I can download it. An even better way to do this would be, what if on my work computer I also had the sync folder? You can install the sync folder, it doesn't take very long. So that anytime I update a file in my home sync folder, that'll automatically update into other sync folders that I've set up. In other words, whatever happens here automatically updates here as well. So if I add something, that file change is going to occur in both places. Okay, you can see why this is helpful. It just saves, we don't have to worry about, oh, which version am I working with? Is this an older version? Is it a newer version? Blah, blah, blah. Because anything that happens here automatically updates there. So let's talk about how that relates to GitHub. Like Dropbox.com, GitHub is an online website. It has its own storage area that's separate. So your computer has places you can store files, but GitHub also has its own computer that stores files. And the idea is that GitHub has a way to create what's called a repository. Okay, a repository is just a dorky way of basically saying like a folder. Okay, and then the idea is your computer can connect to GitHub. Okay, and then you clone, or you basically get a copy of everything that's on inside of the repository. Okay, so I just cloned this repository. So this is a little bit like the sync folder idea. Anything I save here eventually goes back to the main source, which is github.com. So I have cloned this folder from GitHub. I'm going to add a file to it. Okay. When you add something to the folder that you want to send back to GitHub, we call that a commit. A commit is just a way of saying I am adding this file back to the original source. So this person, she, cloned this folder, she adds this file, she saves it, she commits it, syncs it, and then the file gets added to GitHub. And what's nice about this is, let's say we have all of these three people all working on one project. They can clone the folder from GitHub too. So if this person clones the folder from GitHub, they get whatever the most recent version of the file is, okay? Because they're cloning, this is the sort of master source, right? And this other person's also gonna get a copy of those files. Okay, so everyone has a copy of the file. And let's just say for the sake of argument, that this person over here is continually to add files here. She makes an update to this file, changes it, she commits it, sends it back to the original. So she updates the original source. These two people will automatically get their files updated. Okay, so it's this idea that all of these people have a folder that syncs back to the original. And anytime the original file gets changed or updated, or files get added, or files get deleted, that everyone's files automatically update, okay? And that's really powerful because, everyone can work on the files at the same time. It's not one of these where, one person's working on a version, the other person, and one person needs to give the other person by sending them an email or putting it on a thumb drive. It's just, as soon as you upload it, everyone else's files automatically upload, okay? And that's what we're gonna do in class. We're gonna have a very short assignment where there is gonna be a story, okay? Story that is a text file stored on GitHub. Each person's gonna basically download it and then make a change to it, upload it back to GitHub, and then everyone else gets an updated version of that file, okay? So this part, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the terms when it comes to GitHub, and just so we kind of get some of the language before we actually get to even sort of the technical aspect. So it begins with the concept of what's called a repository. All right, and a repository is basically just a folder that exists on github.com, okay? and it's a folder that stores files. Alright? Just like that. So the idea is, when you set up a GitHub, either you're working with someone's repository or you're making your own repository. So let's talk about some other terms. Let's talk about a term called a commit. And what a commit is when you have a repository that has a file or you add a file. That's called a commit. So it's like, let's pretend I'm writing a story, okay? So I write, it was a dark and stormy night, save. That's a commit. Then I go on and I update the story. It was a dark and stormy night, Mr. Green entered the library. So, I've now made another commit. Alright? And I add some more. Let's make a third commit. Alright? And so the idea is that I can kind of keep adding to this. Every time I make a change to it, I'm adding save point, save point, save point, save point, save point. But there's also something called a branch. Okay, it's the idea that at any point, I can take my story and kind of go in a new direction. Okay, so here I'm talking about Mr. Green entering the library. But let's say, for the sake of argument, now it becomes a sci-fi movie. Okay. And so the idea is that at any point, I'm going off and creating this new branch. So instead of it being a sort of a dark and stormy murder mystery, now, the monkey's got a gold coin. So we call this a branch. And the idea is that I had this original story, but I'm now creating like a different version of that. Okay, that's a branch. And I can continue the original story, and that story gets added and added. And at the same time, I am adding to this additional story that's going on. So there's two different paths. The story stays the same up to this point, but then is kind of going down two separate paths, okay? And so these are called branches. Another thing is, sometimes there's something called a pull request. A pull request is when you copy the story, you're getting the original file. So someone downloads this story about there being a monkey with a shiny hand. They decide to add their own, spin to it. The shiny coin was an ancient Mayan gold coin from a secret temple. Okay, so someone copies the story, they make a variation, that's part of the branch, and then they can actually submit that back. Okay, that's called a push. A push is when someone downloads or copies the files, makes changes, updates things, that kind of stuff, and then puts them back to the master source. Okay, so the act of grabbing the files is called a pull. The act of pushing them, putting them back to the master source is called a push. And the person who owns the master files, they can decide if they want to allow this. Okay, so someone usually runs the repository, and they say, yes, I'm going to allow these changes, or no, I'm not going to allow these changes. All right, guys, so let's talk about how all of that corresponds to GitHub. So GitHub has a repository that might have a file here. And then what happens is you would take that file, you, the user, and you do a pull request. The pull request would take your file, copy it to your computer. Okay? You can then go and make some changes to it. And then when you save, you would create a commit. The commit means you're saving what you did. And then eventually we want to put it back onto GitHub. That would be a push. So I would push, or basically copy this file back to GitHub. Alright. Downloading is a pull request, editing is a commit, uploading is a push request. Alright guys, so I'm going to show you guys how to work with GitHub and GitHub Desktop. Okay, so we are going to be working on a lab that's collaborative where I'm giving you guys a text file and you guys are going to connect to my text file and you're going to download it, make changes to it, and then re-upload it. So for this to work, first thing you need to do is you need to be inside of the GitHub Desktop app. So if you're at school or the Batmail lab, you should have access to GitHub Desktop. If you're at home, you can download it for free by going to, just type in GitHub Desktop into Google, I'm sure it'll show up. Here it is, I'm going to launch it. There's a little GitHub icon right there. So this should be step one, is log into GitHub. I'm going to sign into GitHub. So when you guys set up your GitHub accounts, you should have a username and then a password. That's what you would put here. I have sort of a dummy account to do this demo. I'm going to bypass this stuff in configure. Don't worry about configuring. Don't worry about any of this. Just hit finish. Okay. So you are now logged in. If you ever need to log out, or if for some reason it logs into this and you didn't have a chance to log in, you can always go under Preferences under GitHub, and then Preferences under Accounts. And if it's not signed, if someone else is signed in, you can sign them out and sign in. Or if you're not signed in, there should be a way to sign in with your username and password. Okay, so I'm already signed in. That's important. Okay. Then I'm going to go to, I've given you guys a link to my repository. Okay, so I have a repository that in theory you guys have been added to, so you should be able to have access to it. And then it's found at http://github.com/davidhurwich/VMD105. That is a URL to a specific repository that I set up that has a file, has the lab in it. You can see it right here. And if you've given me your GitHub ID, I should have added you to this repository, so you should have access to it. So what you're going to do is click where it says clone or download. Okay. And we're going to open in desktop. What that's actually going to do is clone this folder, which is called, or this repository, which is called VMD105, into your GitHub and give you a copy of the file. So I'm going to hit open in desktop. Open in GitHub Desktop. So you go back to GitHub, you see I'm getting URL. This is showing me where I'm getting the repository from. This is where the clone folder is going to be on your computer. This is going to be where you get a copy of the file that you can edit and that kind of thing. So we're going to click on local path. Let's hit choose and then set it to desktop. That's going to make our life a lot easier. It's just putting it on the desktop. I'm going to hit open. So you can see it's set to desktop here. That's the important part. I'm going to hit clone. Alright. So here's the folder right here on my desktop, and I'm going to double click. And inside of the folder is the file. Okay, this is the master file. This is the file that everyone's going to be working from. It's a text file. You can open it up into text edit or into GitHub. Okay. So I'm going to open this into text edit just because that's the default program. It's opening in text edit. So this is going to be a story. Okay. What you're going to do is you are going to, it's a collaborative story, right? So the idea is like you use the last paragraph and you look at the paragraph and you use it as a story. It's going to be fun. All right. What I want you guys to do is just type your name and then, write something, part of the story, and then just put a line to separate each person out. So I'm going to go here. So this story is about a woman named Mary. She's taking a nap on the bus, noticing a weird smell. So I'm just going to call myself like Joe Student or something. Let's turn it. So Mary closed her eyes, and when she awoke, she noticed bus was parked outside of the city dump. Save. Okay, so I made a change to this file here. I'm gonna go back to GitHub, and when you make a change to a file in GitHub, it'll tell you that you've made a change. It says changes, it shows you the change. If you look at a file in GitHub, anything that is pink, that is like, or sorry, I should say green. Anything that's green is like new material, things that have been added to the project, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna commit, which means we're saving these changes and we're sending them back to the original master source, which is on GitHub, okay? And so to do that, we need to make a commit, which is down here. When you make a commit, you must have like a description of what you're doing, okay? Because the idea is this is collaborative and everyone, you know, is adding to this and we wanna know who's adding what. So we want a little description of the things we're adding. So I'm gonna say, you know, Joe student making a commit. I am adding to the story. Might put in the date or something, you know. This is where you would describe the changes you're making. Commit to master. So when you're done, you've made the commit. You'll notice up here it says push, okay? What push does is it pushes the file from your computer back to GitHub. Okay, so you want to hit push. Takes a second or two, depending on how many files there are. There's only one file. Boom. Okay, we're good. So another way you can check this is go back to github.com and like you should be actually open to look at the open file. So I can literally see, here's my Joe student. It's right there. So I can see that it's been updated, okay? So with the lab, you guys are gonna do this, you're gonna download the file, you're going to make changes to it, and re-upload it through GitHub desktop app. And then make sure that you push it when you're done.